How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Beis, Daf 22 of Masechta Shevuos. Friends. Okay, yeah, we're going to get up to the next Mishnah on today's Daf. Is this the second? Does that make it only the second Mishnah of the Parak? I guess so. Yeah, I guess we're going to get up to the second Mishnah of the Parak. So today we're just kind of finishing up the outstanding things from the first Mishnah. So like, when they Kolshu stuff, and he says, well, do you ever speak in Chaya? Anyways, we're gonna get into like the back and forth between the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah. We're gonna analyze it. How's that? Okay, Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of the daf is where our journey begins. Right, so Rabbi Akiva had said that when it comes to a shvuah, if he says, I'm shvuah, I'm not going to eat any salad. So Rabbi Akiva says, even if you eat a kolshu of salad, by accident, you have to bring a korban oleh. The Chacham say, ma pitom. Where do we ever see a kolshu being a thing? Vilo, what do you mean? Very nimala. If you eat an ant, you're going to be chayav makis, birya, shiny. Yeah, but that's a whole thing. Sure, it's a tiny little ant, but you're eating an entire item, one whole item, a whole tiny item, but a whole item nonetheless, and therefore it's significant. That makes it significant. Vare hekdish. What about hekdish? But if you get benefit from hekdish, even if the hekdish is less than a kazayis, but if you get a shava pruta's worth of hanoya, so then you will. So then you'll be. So meila. So habin and shvei pruta. Okay, but the thing is, fine. Maybe if it's less than a kazayis, but the point is, there's a different measurement when it comes to hekdish. It's not about a kazayis. It's about the value. It's about shvei pruta, and so there we don't gauge it by kazayis. We gauge it by whether it's a shavar pruta. But then that becomes what's important. Barei mefarish. Yeah. Okay. What about the fact that by technically you can be explicit about the less than a kazayit amount. Meaning, if you say shvuah that I'm not going to eat any salad at all, so then you chayiv even if you eat any salad at all, even if it's less than a kazayis. Okay, b'farish nami kiber yadami. But the thing is, when you say it explicitly, then it becomes chashuv, becomes significant, just like birya, right? Just like one ant is significant. So also, if you say, I'm not going to eat even one leaf of salad, so that one leaf becomes important. Very offer. What about dirt, right? If you say I'm not going to eat, and then you eat, very offer. Okay, interesting. So the Gemara asks, what about offer? We're going to get more to offer on Chav Beis Amud Beis, and we're about to reference it now as well. That Rava basically asks, what if a person says, I'm not going to eat any dirt? Okay, so is it a kolshu, is it kazayis? So now the Gemara says, from the fact that we're asking over here about offer, about dirt, implying that you're chayiv if you eat less than, if you eat any amount of dirt, well then, Elo tifsho debai Rave, well then it sounds like we have the answer to Rava's question, which is, shvuah sheloi oichal offer ve'ochal bechama. If a person makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat any offer, any dirt, and then he eats dirt, so what's the shear? So tifshot adi ika kazayis. So let us say from here, from the fact that Rabbi Akiva, from the fact that the Chachamim are saying to Rabbi Akiva that where do we ever have a scenario where you be chayiv for less than a kazayis, and they don't seem to be taking offer into account. Offer doesn't, right? They're not considering offer. It sounds like, well, offer must have to be a kazayis then, right? So let's say that so Rava asked the question: is it a kolshu or is it a kazayis? Sounds like it's a kazayis, right? Because the rabbis are saying to Rabbi Akiva, where do we ever have a scenario where it's less than a kazayis? So it sounds like offer would not be a scenario where it's less than a kazayis. Right? So tifshar adika kazayis. So let's say that it must be that the answer to Rava's question is that you'd have to eat a kazayis of dirt. Ki ka'amrinon b'midi debar achila ka'amrinon zel. Yeah, but the thing is, where the Chachamim were talking about things that you eat. Offer dirt is not things that you eat. So therefore, even if offer would be a kolshu, that doesn't really make a difference. The rabbis were saying, where do we ever find that by things that you actually eat, is less than a kazayis would be significant. What about konams? Right? If a person says that this salad to me, okay? If a person says konam this salad to me, so he's chayiv even for a kolshu. Konamos nami kimefarish dami. Yeah, but konamos also since in a konam, in a netter, you don't explicitly say achila, right? When it comes to a shvua, you say shvua shelo ochal salat, okay? Shvua shelo ochal. So we're talking about achila. Achila is bikazayis. But when it comes to a konam, when it comes to a netter, so you're not saying anything about achila, you're simply saying this salad is also to me. So if that is the case, so then that's even a kolshu, because he's not talking about achila there, he's just saying it's completely asur, even a kolshu over there. So therefore, konamos are specifically by konamos, it's kimefarish dami. It's as if they were explicit that the chiyuv would be even a kolshu. Amar Loin, Rabbi Akiva responds to the Chachamim, Heichon matzinu b'medaber umevi korban shezeh medaber umevi korban. Right, so the rabbis ask a kasha on Rabbi Akiva. They say, Rabbi Akiva, why are you saying that by Shevuos he's chayiv even for a kolshu? Where do we ever find that you're chayiv for a kolshu? To which Rabbi Akiva retorts, and he says, sounds like there's noise coming from outside. 1 second. There is. Is my neighbor yelling at somebody? Oh, I think she is. I don't know. Maybe it's some group. Maybe now that it's getting nicer out and it's like more summery, so it's getting more active outside, the people are getting more noisy. Akoponim. So where were we? Who could remind me? Oh. So they said, where do we ever see that somebody eats less than a kizayis and he's chayiv? To which Rabbi Akiva retorts, that's where we're up to. Rabbi Akiva retorted, and he said, yeah, but then again, this whole scenario is unique. Shevuos are unique, because where, after all, do we ever have a scenario where somebody says something like, I'm not going to eat salad, and just based on what he says, all of a sudden he has to bring a korban? Where do we ever see that? So this whole scenario is unique, and that's why it's also unique that we're talking about a kolshu, we're not talking about a kazayas. V'loi frakti gebache. Very megadef. What about megadef? A person curses the Rabbeinu Shalom, and according to Rabbi Akiva, says Rashi, he brings a korban for that. So if that's the case, he's saying epis and bringing a korban because of what he said. Medaber v'oser ko amrinon v'medaber v'chote hu. The thing is, what Rabbi Akiva is saying, where do we ever have a scenario where somebody says something, and by saying what he says, something now becomes usur, to the extent that if he violates now what he says, he's going to have to bring a korban for violating the isur that he himself created with his words, right? Kilu, when a person says, I'm not going to eat, so a person's allowed to eat salad. All of a sudden he says the words, I am not going to eat salad. Shvua that I'm not going to eat salad. All of a sudden, salad, mamish, becomes usur to him. And if he eats salad, he has to bring a korban, all because of what he said. He violated his own statement, and now he has to bring a korban because of the isur that he himself created with his words. That's different than megadef, which is he simply is a sinner. He sinned. You're not allowed to curse God. He cursed God. He has to bring a korban. He did something wrong. He didn't create an isser. He just simply, there's a mitzvah losa say against cursing the Rabbanu Shalom, Rachmana Litzlan, and he violated that law. So medaber v'oser ka'amrina, we're talking about, Rabbi Akiva is talking about where he, with his words, he creates an isser, and then he has to bring a korban for it. V'hai, when it comes to megadev, medaber v'chotehu, he's using his words to sin, and that's why he has to bring a korban, but it's different. V'arei nazir, what about a Nazirite? What about a nazir? A guy says, Areini nazir. 2 words, Areini nazir. And all of a sudden, now he becomes it's Tam Nazirus Shloshim Yom, now he becomes a nazir. At the end of his Nazirus, he brings korbanos. So based on his words that he said, Hareini nazir, he's now bringing korbanos. Yeah, but the thing is, maybe korbano al diburo koamrinon, v'hai maybe korbano, korban, lishtaruye le chamru deka maise. But again, similarly, right, when it comes to Shevuos, right, Rabbi Akiva is saying, right, where do we have another scenario where based on what he says, he's bringing a korban based on specifically to what he says? Meaning, by a korban, by a nazir, he says, I'm a nazir, great, so he becomes a nazir. Okay, once his nazirus is over, then if he wants to be able to drink wine again, he brings korbanos to do that, right? But it's not, right, meaning, when I say I'm not eating salad, so when would I have to bring, if I never eat salad again, I don't have to bring a korban. I'm only bringing a korban if I violate the very statement that I made. Whereas by nazir, it's, once you say already nazir, you become a nazir. That's the only thing that happens. Once the nazirus is over, so then if you want to go back to being able to drink wine, so then you're going to have to bring a korban, but it's not like, you violated something that you said, or you made something, also based on what you said, it triggered some kind of korban. Whenever you're done, if you want to be able to drink wine again, so you got to bring a korban. But again, we're looking for things where literally you're creating an isser that you yourself are then end up violating, and you bring a korban because of the thing the monster that you created with your own words, Kilu. Okay, Varei Hektish. What about Hektish? Hektish is a great example, right? Right, a person says that I'm being makdish this animal. Let's say I'm being makdish this animal. So what's he saying? He's saying that this animal is be'etzem, I can't get hana from it. I can't get enough. Right, a second ago, I was able to get hana from it. Anybody can get hana from it. All of a sudden, I make it hektish. That means it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash now. I can't get hana. Nobody else can get hana. So if anybody gets hana from it now, all of a sudden you have to bring a korban me'ilah. That's very similar. Based on your words, that you're being makdish the animal, all of a sudden, if somebody ends up getting hana from it, they're going to find themselves in a situation where they're going to have to bring in osher me'ilos. So that sounds like it should be a great example. You're saying something and you're bringing a korban because of what you said. And for the Gemara, okay, but when it comes to so we're talking about a shvuah which is specifically for me, right? I say I'm not eating salad anymore. It only affects me. Then if he eats salad, so if I eat salad, then I have to bring a korban olev yored. But when you're makdish something, it's not just for the person who's makdish it, it's for everybody. It's hektish now. Nobody can get enough from it. Harei konamis. What about konams? If I say salad is asur to me. I say salad is asur to me. I say salad is asur to me. Right, up until now we've been talking about Shevuos where I say I'm not going to eat salad. Here I say salad is asur to me. So if I get benefit from that salad, so I'll have to bring a korban based on what I said, and it's specific to me. Well, Rabbi Akiva holds that there's no din me'ilah when it comes to nedarim, when it comes to konams, right? Therefore, if I say this salad is asur to me, and then I end up eating it, I would not, by accident, I would not have to bring in asham me'ilas, because Rabbi Akiva holds that there's no me'ilah by konams, and we're dafka going to see this a little bit later on the daf. Omar Rove says Rove. Machlokes be stam. The machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Akiva about is it a kol shehu like Rabbi Akiva or is it a kazayis like the Chachamim? So that's bistam. When he doesn't give an amount, when he says salad is also to me, Rabbi Akiva says kol shehu, the Chachamim say kazayis. Aval b'mifarish, but if he's explicit that any amount of salad usher to me, well then even the Chacham would agree that we're talking about any amount. If he specifies well, if he specifies any amount, well then it's any amount. My time in Mefarish Nami Kibir Yadami, as we said earlier, that being explicit makes something significant in the same way that, like, you know, an ant, even though it's tiny, it's significant because it's a whole item and therefore it's significant. So also when you say any amount, you're like being machshiv, you're making significant any amount, and therefore you be chayiv for any amount. V'amar Rava, and says Rava machlokes b'shaloi ochel, ava b'shaloi, okay, machlokes b'shaloi ochal, right. And the machlokes is when he says I will not eat salad. So eating, Chomzeh is talking about a kazayis. So aval b'shelo etom, but if he says I won't even taste any salad, well then tivyakol b'cholshu, then everyone agrees we're talking about any amount. Pshita, this is obvious. If he says I'm not even going to taste salad, well that's even just the taste. So madetema litom nami kedami inshe kamash malan. Well, I may have thought that when he says they're not going to taste salad, it's like the people to say, I'm going to go and I'm going to have a taste of something, but it could, hey, let's just have a taste. It could end up being a proper achila. Tasting could sometimes mean more than just tasting. Having a taste could mean, I guess if you say to your pals, like, hey, let's just have a taste of pizza. So, probably talking about at least a slice or something. Al koponim. That might be a key like proper achila. So therefore, kamash milan, that when he says taste, it is a kol shehu. Amar Papa says a Papa. Machlokes b'Shevuos, that this machlokes is by Shevuos. Okay, that by Shevuos the Chacham say we're talking about a kazayis. Rabbi Akiva says we're talking about a kol shehu. Aval b'konomis tivyakol b'chol shehu. But by konomis, if he says salad is usher to me, then it's a kol shehu. It is any amount. My time outcome konomis nami kevin delo komadker shma da achilo kidmefarish dami. Because when it comes to konomis, since he does not explicitly say achila is because eyes, but by konomis he's not saying anything about achila. He's simply saying that salad is also to me. So that is a kol shehu. It doesn't have to be a kazais. Okay. So this machlokes is by Shevuos. The Chacham say we're talking about a kazais, but by konams it is even a kol shehu. It's any amount. Meisvei, we have a contradiction. Shnei konamus mitztarfin. Now this is interesting. We're saying that two konams. So if he says, I'll just use Rashi's example, bread, right? He says, konam this bread alai upon me, konam that bread upon me. So basically, he has two konams. And now we're saying that a little bit of bread from each loaf can join together to make a shear, which is suspicious because Rav Papa just said that by konams, it's a kol shehu, it's any amount, and yet we have a braise which is saying that by konams, two amounts from two loaves can join together to create a shear for a konam. That's strange. I thought we said there is no shear for konam. Shtei shvuos ein mitztarvis. Now, if you have, a shvua for this bread and a shvua for that bread, so then they don't join together to create a shear to have to bring a korban ole v'yored. Okay. Reb Meir almost says konamus keshvuos, that konams are like shvuos, that they don't join together. Now if it's like Rav Papa says chayv v'kolshu, that by a konam you're chayv for a kolshu, lomali litzaref. Why are we talking about joining amounts together? You don't need any amount. It's a kolshu. So, and for the Gemara, the Omar achila mizoi olai koinam, achila mizo olai konam. Well, it's talking about where he says that in achila from this loaf is asur to me, and in achila from that loaf is asur to me. So there he's taught. So dafka it's a konam, right? He says konam, but he also mentions achila in the same statement. So because he's talking about achila, so therefore that's why we're talking about a shir of a kazayis, and we're saying that the two breads could join together to form that kazayis. But then the Gemara asks, but wait, if you're saying in achila from this bread, konam, achila from that bread, konam, well that implies that you have to have a kazayis from each bread. If you just join together little bits from each bread to create a kazayis, you don't have an achila from this bread and an achila from that bread. An achila from each bread means a kazayis from each bread. Okay, fine. To Omer achila mishtein olai konam. Fine. Okay. He says in achila, a kazayis, mishtein from both of them is a konam. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So by default, a konam, says Rav Papa, we're talking about a kolshu. But if he says that nachila from both loaves is a konam for me, so then we're talking about one kazayis, and it could be composed from both loaves. Azoy. Okay, fine. Okay, so he says achila mishtein olai konam, and therefore they can join together in that case. But if that's the case, right? So what did the Brisa say? Shnei konamos mitzdarfin, shtei shvu. I'm reading the Brisa. Shnei konamos mitzdarfin, shtei shvuos ein mitzdarfin. We're saying that by konams it could be mitzdarf, by shvuos it can't be mitzdarf. And clearly we're talking about the same case for both of them. We're saying that if it's a konam, mitzdarf; if it's a shvua, not mitzdarf. So if that's the case, so if he says, so the chavos agabe shvua de omar shvua shlo ochal mishtein, mayin mitzdarf. But if that's the case, then the analogous situation by a shvua would be where he says shvua shlo ochal mishtein, that I'm not going to ochel kazayis mishtein from both of them, and we're saying ein mitzdarfin. Why not? If you're saying a shvua that it won't ochel from both of them, one achila, one kazayis from both of them, they should be mitzdarif. So amayin mitzdarfin. Why are they not mitzdarif? Amar Rab Pinchis, says Rab Pinchis, shiny shvuis mitoch shechalukis lechatos ein mitzdarfis. Oh, we're going to learn. Taka, it's on today's daf, Lamais. It's the end of today's daf, but I'm not going to learn it. I'm going to do it tomorrow, because otherwise we're just going to end with a Mishnah. I'd rather for tomorrow, the whole Gemara is going to be about this upcoming Mishnah. I'll just start with the Mishnah tomorrow, even though it's a big Mishnah, but I'll go upon it. So in the Mishnah that's on this daf, but that we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to see that if he says, Shvua shelo ochal, I'm reading from the Mishnah, paschitin, pasorin, paskusmin, if he says, I'm not going to eat wheat bread, barley bread, spelt bread, and then he eats all three of them, he's not chayav one shvua, he's chayav for three separate shvuas. And therefore, since by shvuas we see that they can be divided up for the korbans, so they're also divided up for their shears. If you're going to have to bring a separate korban for each loaf of bread, in this case, well then also, they're not going to join together to create one shear, you're going to have a kazayis from each one. So that's specific to shvuas though, because shvuas, you bring separate korbanis, masha einkin by konams, and therefore konams can join together, but shvuas won't. Again, Amar Rab Pinchis, says Rab Pinchis, shani shvuas, that is different when it comes to shvuas, mitoch shechalukis lechatouis, since they are divided, right? You would bring separate chatoses for each, or korban olivioris, for each loaf of bread in our case, ein mitzdarfis, therefore they do not. So the two loaves don't join together to create one shear. You have to have a separate shear from each loaf. Okay, but now then let's move on in the brisa. If that's the case, now we get to Reb Meir's opinion. What did Reb Meir say? Again, so Reb Meir Omer says, Reb Meir, konamis kishvuos. Konams are like shvuos that they aren't mitztarif. Bishlam shvuos or v'chalukas l'chatuos. So I understand why by shvuos the shears don't join together, because since you bring separate chatases, so you have to have a kazayis from each. Fine. But ela konamis amaylo. But by konamis, there's no separate chatas stuff there by konams. So therefore, so the shears should join together. Ipuch, I'll flip it around. Meir Omer says, Meir, shvuos ki konamis. No, that shvuos actually are like konams, and that the shears do join together. V'leisle lider of Pinchas, and he doesn't hold of Rav Pinchas. Rav Pinchas has said, since you bring separate korbanos, the shears don't join together. But Rav Meir doesn't hold of that, and Rav Meir would say that shvuos are like konams, and that the shears can join together. Okay, fine. Ravina Omar says, Ravina ki ka'omer apape le'inyan malkis kitanya ay le'inyan korban debe'inan shvei pruta. Oh, so going back to our question, that Rav Papa says that when it comes to konams, it's a kolshu, it's any amount. But we have a brisa that says that by konams you can join together from different breads to create a shear, implying that we're talking about a kazayis over here. It's not just any amount. Okay, so who had to answer this? Was it just the Gemara? Maybe, I don't know if there's a specific answer. I think it was just the stam. The stam of the Gemara answered it. And so we had just said that we're talking about when he says that an achila from both of them is also to me. Fine. Ravina comes up with a different answer. He says tzvei dinin. We're talking about two under zach in two things. When Rav Papa says that by konams we're talking about a kolshu, that's for makis. That if he says that this loaf of bread is also to me, so he'll be chayiv makis even for any amount. But if we're talking about a korban, we're talking about a korban me'ilah, and we had said earlier, about is there a korban? Is there me'ilah when it comes to konams, when it comes to nadarim? Okay, we'll get there in a second, but for now we're assuming yes. Although we're gonna get to there. But so we're talking about a korban that we're talking about if you accidentally eat from this bread. So if you say konam this bread on me and konam that bread on me, and you accidentally eat it, and you have to bring an osham me'ilos, if you have a kazayis, so for that it's not about a kazayis, it's about shava pruta. You'd have to get benefit of a shava pruta, so they could join together for the shear of a shava pruta, of a pruta's worth of value, of hanoya. So again, Ravina Omer says, Ravina ki ka'omer ha'pope, when our pope says a kolshu by konamos linyan malchus, that's for whipping. Kitanyo ayi, when the Brisa talks about joining together for a shear, linyan korban, that is for an oshem me'ilos. If you get hanoah from these breads, you eat them, mistama, debe'inan shvei pruta, you have to have hanoah of a shava pruta, so for that they can join together. Remember the save rabbanon yesh mila bekonomis, but frek de gemore. If that's the case, that the Tanakama of the Brisa, the Rabbanan in the Brisa are saying that the two breads can join together for a shear, but according to Ravina, the Chachamim in the Brisa are saying that the two breads can join together for a shear of a Shaveh Pruta for a Osha Me'ilos by Konamos. Well, clearly then the Chachamim hold that there is such a thing of an Osha Me'ilos, that there is a concept of me'ilah by konams, by nedochim. So the maybe the savir aboni yesh me'ilah bekonamis ve'atanya. But 1 second, I'll prove fakert from the following brisa. Kikar zoy hekdish. If he says this bread is hekdish, ve'achla, and then he eats it by accident, ben hu ben chavero, whether he eats it, whether his friend ate it, mo'al. So there's going to be me'ilah there. Lefichach yeshlo pigeon, because we're talking about whether because we're talking about it being usher to everybody, and therefore whether he gets benefit from it, whether his friend gets benefit from him, it's usher to everybody. So therefore it's hektish, and hektish can be potent. Kikar zo olai hektish. If he says that this loaf is upon me hektish, it's basically, he's making it usher to himself alone. So hu mo'al, he can be over a me'ilah, chaver lo mo'al, but not his friend. The fichach in the pigeon, because we're talking about him making it only usher upon himself. So therefore, there's no pigeon. Only by regular hektish there's pigeon, not when it's just making it usher to himself. But he will be mo'el. But there is a din me'ilah by, essentially this is a konam, he's making it usher to himself. Divrei Reb Meir, that is Reb Meir's opinion. So Reb Meir says that there is me'ilah by konamis. But Chachamim omrim, whereas the Chachamim say, bein hu uvein chavero lo mo'al. No, whether he gets benefit, whether his friend gets benefit by accident, right? Whether he or his friend get benefit by accident, there's no din me'ilah when it comes to konamos lefi she'ein me'ilah b'konamos. Neither one of them will be mo'el, since there's no din me'ilah when it comes to konam. So we see here that the rabbi said that there's no din me'ilah by konams. So Ravina came to say that Rav Papa says that by konams you chai for a kolshu, but there's a brayso that says that the shears joined together. Ravina says that's for a korban me'ilah. What do you mean? But right, the rabbis say that the shears joined together for korban me'ilah, but the rabbis say that there's no din me'ilah when it comes to konams. Ipuch. Flip around the opinions in this brayso that we just read, and say that the rabbis are the ones who say that there is a din me'ilah, and Reb Meir is the one who says that there's no din me'ilah. Ipuch, flip it around. Echad zeh lo ma'al lefi she'ein me'ilah b'konamas divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir is the one who says that there's no din me'ilah by konamas. V'chacham omim hu ma'al v'chaver lo ma'al, whereas the chacham say he is mo'el but not his friend, because the chacham say that there is a din me'ilah by konamos. And that also explains the earlier brisa where the shears by a konam are mitzaref for a asher me'ilos by a konam. Fine. If that's the case, though, Reb Meir Omer konamos k'shvuos. Reb Meir says that konams are like shvuos, i.e., that the shear, that they cannot join together for a shear. And if what Ravina is saying is that brayso is talking about for a asher me'ilos by konamos, well then why is and if we're saying that Reb Meir says that there's no din me'ilah by konamos, so why is Reb Meir talking about shears? Ele konamos itztarufe hu delo mitztarfe. So I don't understand. So the brayso is in that Reb Meir says that konams are like shvuos, that konamos are like shvuos, that they're not mitztaref, right? Right, again, konamos it's tarufe delo mitztarfe, so they won't be able to be mitztaref together for a shear of a shvei pruta to bring a asher me'ilos by konamos. Ha me'ilah is behu, but the implication is that Reb Meir holds that there is me'ilah by konamos, just that the two breads won't join together for the shvei pruta. For Reb Meir ein me'ilah by konamos klal. But I thought Reb Meir had just said that there is no din me'ilah at all by koinams. So, and for the Gemara, that's correct. Reb Meir says there's no din me'ilah by koinamos. L'divrei derabanan ka'amarlu. When Reb Meir says that the shears are not mitzdaref for konams for a Asher Me'ilah, that he says konamos are like Shevuos, he's responding to the rabbis. The rabbis say that there is Me'ilah by konamos, and he's responding to them. L'didi Me'ilah b'konamos is cloud. He says, look, as far as I'm concerned, there is no Me'ilah at all by konamos. However, l'didchu, but according to you, that you say, Chachamim, you say that there is a din Me'ilah by konamos. Oduli mias the konamos k'shvuos. At least admit to me that konams are like shvuos, that they are not mitzdarif. Rabbanan shvuos ikadur pinchas konamas lekadur pinchas. But the rabbis say, look, by shvuos there's the halacha of right, there's the opinion of Reb Pinchas that since they have separate korbanos, they have separate shiurs. But that's not the case by konams, and by konams they can join to the shears can join together. One second, I'm just gonna. Is there noise from outside? What's that? No, not really. In my mind, there was like noise. I don't know. I think it was just in my mind. Omar Rove says Rove Shevuos shelo ochal. Okay, we saw this earlier. That if a person says Shevuos shelo ochal, makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat. V'achal offer. And then he ate dirt. Potter. Eating dirt doesn't count. But Rava asks, Shevuos shelo ochal offer. But what if he says explicitly a shvuah that I'm not going to eat dirt, and then he eats dirt? Now, in that case, it's going to be trouble because he was explicit that he's talking about eating dirt and then he ate dirt. So, Kevin the Omer shelo ochal daitea kizayis. So, do we say that? Look, if he's explicit that he's not going to eat dirt, so since he says ochal, so ochel is a kizayis. So, does that mean we're talking about a kizayis of dirt? Or maybe since it is something. Dirt is not something that people actually eat, so it's not a shir achila, it's just a kolshu. Teku. Now, chevra, I am updating my definition of teku. For a while, I've been translating teku as ich weiß nicht. However, I would like to change it moving forward. I want to change it to let's move on. The reason I can't remember why exactly the reason for that is. I think it's because it's not teku isn't really ichveisnish. It's more open. It's more looking to the future. It's teku, right? I don't know if this is actually accurate, but like tishbi, what was it? Teku tishbi yeshev kushes v'baros or something. So tishbi yitaritz kushes v'baros. I don't know if that's actually true. But it's like when Mashiach comes, then we'll get the answer. So it's more, Mashiach now. It's more looking towards the future. It's more hopeful. Chveis is just like, I don't know. This is silly. Let's move on is more open than I don't know. So let's move on. Boy, Rove asks, Shevuos shelo ochal chartzin. Bikama. Okay, what if a person makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat grape seeds? He's not going to eat grape seeds. Okay, how much grape seeds? Kolshu, kazayis. Given the masachil aidei tarov is daitea kazayis. Well, do we say that technically speaking, grape seeds are eaten? Normally, they're eaten with grapes. You don't normally eat just grape seeds. But you do eat grapes. You do eat grape seeds with grapes and grapes. And so generally, when you're eating grape seeds, you are eating them in a manner of achila. So now, when he says specifically a shvuah that he's not going to eat grape seeds, does he have in mind kizayis? Because generally, when you eat grape seeds, albeit together with grapes, we're talking about a kizayis of eating, a proper eating. Or maybe since people don't normally eat just grape seeds, so he's not talking about a shir achila. He's talking about any amount. Teku. Let's move on. Boy Ravashi asakasha Nazir she'omer a Nazir. A Nazir is not allowed to eat grapes. He's not allowed to drink wine. He's not allowed to eat grape seeds. What is that? I think the pasuk says anything that comes from a grape. he's not allowed to have. So if he says, he makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat grape seeds. So what's he talking about? What does he have in mind? Talking about a kazayis? He's talking about a kolshu? Now, Kevin the kazayis isur doraisu. Now look, he's already not allowed to eat grape seeds. And ain't shvuah chalal shvuah, so kilu. He's already not allowed to eat grape seeds because he's a nazir. So if he's saying, I'm not going to eat grape seeds, so if he's talking about a kazayis, well then it's basically irrelevant. So kika mishnaba teraka mishnaba v'daiti amashu. So do we say, look, since he's already not allowed to eat a kazayis of grape seeds, maybe he's specifically talking. So if the motzi dvar of levatola. So he's not just wasting time. So it must be that he's talking about a kolshu because he's not usher bekolshu of grape seeds. Now he's making a shvuah that he's not even going to have a kolshu of grape seeds. O dilma, or perhaps came into Amar Shalo Ochal daiti kazayis. Or maybe when he says Shevuos Shelo Ochal Chartin, Achilas Bekazayis, he's talking about a kazayis of grape seeds. He's talking about a kazayis of grape seeds. He's talking about it. So that's the shayla. When he says that he's not going to eat grape seeds, he's talking about a kazayis of grape seeds, even though he's already not allowed to eat a kazayis of grape seeds. Or maybe dafka, because he's already not allowed to eat kazayis of grape seeds, maybe he's dafka talking about something that he currently is allowed to eat, and he's saying that that's asur, i.e. a kolshu. Tashma kamanir, Shevuos Shelo Ochal. Well, if a person makes a shvuah, and this is also going to be in the Mishnah later on the daf, Shevuos Shelo Ochal, a person makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat. Ve'ochal nevelis treifis shkotzim uremosim chayav. Reb Shimon Poter. So he says that he's not going to eat, and then he eats nevela, treifa, shkotz, or remus. And we're saying that he's taka chayiv for violating the shvuah. That he's taka chayiv for violating this shvuah. We ask him, why is he chayiv? He's already not allowed to eat nevela, treifa, shkotz, remus. Rav Shmuel of Rabbi Yochanan te'amei b'chol dvarim hamutarim in dvarim asurin. Well, so Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan say, well, it's because he's talking about since he's making a shvuah on more than just nevela, treifa, shkotz, and ramas, it's also dvarim hamutarim, so therefore it gets included with them. So even though he's already usher for those things, but it was kind of a bigger shvuah, and they got included in that bigger shvuah. Rish Lakish says, "I atamotzi ela I b'mefarish chatzi shir v'ali b'derabanan." Rish Lakish says, well, either we're talking about where, according to the rabbis, who say that by default the shvuah would apply to, would be for a kazayis. So if he explicitly said less than a kazayis, or b'stam v'ali b'derabakiva d'amar adam oser atzma b'cholshu, or according to Rabbi Kiva, even if he doesn't explicitly say less than a kazayis, because by default it's a kol shu for Rabbi Kiva. But what do we see? According to the rabbis, by default it would be talking about a kazayis. V'nevela demushba v'omed me'asinayu. Now nevela, which is something that he's already not allowed to eat, and yet we're talking about the shvuah, applies to a kazayis. V'chichas and legabe nazir dami. And that's similar to grape seeds for a nazir, because a grape seed is not allowed. A nazir is not allowed to have grape seeds. V'taimid de parish, and the reason why he's chayiv is specifically because he explicitly says that he's talking about less than a kizayis. Halo parish taitei kizayis. But if he wouldn't have explicitly said that he's talking about less than a kizayis, the shvuah would be for a kizayis, even though nevela, treifa, shkotz, mas are things that are already also to him. So shmamina. So we see that also by the grape seeds he's talking about a kazayis, even though they're already also to him b'kazayis. Ela tifshot debay Rava. So maybe now then, let us answer Rava's question about the dirt. Right? If we're saying that something that he is not right that people don't eat is nonetheless a kazayis when he makes a shvuah about it, so then dirt should also be a kazayis. Tifsha debai Rava, that which Rava asked, Shevuos Shelo Ochal offer Bechama, how much we're talking about? If he says Shevuos shel ochal offer, now offer is something that people don't eat. So tifsho ta'adika kazayis. So let's say that it's talking about kazayis. Da nevela ka'offer damya, because nevela is like offer. You don't eat nevela. You also don't eat offer. And nevela we're talking about is by default Shevuos is a kazayis. So let's say the same thing would apply to offer. The time of the parish, alo parish da'atia kazayis. Right, that when it comes to nevela, he would have to explicitly say that he's talking about less than a kazayis, but by default it would be a kazayis. Lo, offer lav barachila uklal. No, there's a difference. Offer is something that people don't eat at all. It is something that just is not food. People don't eat it. Nevela basachila. Look, nevela is just an animal that hasn't been shechted properly, but it could totally be food. Ve'ayu deravya ilav. Just a lion is like. How do you define that literally? It is that a lion crouches upon it. Like kilu, basically it's technically edible, but the Torah says you can't eat it, but it is edible. So that's why over there we could say that the shear of is achila is bekazayis, but dirt is just dirt. People don't eat dirt, and there's no. So I wouldn't say from there that dirt is bekazayis. Wow. Okay, this was a kind of a good daf. We wrapped up the first Mishnah in the third parak of Masechta Shevuos. We talked about for the rabbi is saying that achila is always bekazayis. When do we ever have examples of less than a kazayis? We tried to explore examples of we explored different possibilities of examples that are less than a kazayis. Rabbi Akiva then responded that, well, when do we ever have a scenario where you say something and you have to bring a korban for it? And then we explored different scenarios where maybe you do bring korbanos based on things that you said, and then we got into different discussions about different shiurim by shiurim being mitzdaref for konamos, for shvuos, and all sorts of different interesting halachas about that. Peace out.